So the United States is currently responsible for 11% of global carbon emissions. And what this bill is going to do, it is projected to reduce carbon emissions 40% by the year 2030. Now, as I'm speaking today, it is just about 2023. That's in only 7 years. 40% carbon reduction emissions in 7 years. We did that. This is a done deal. This is legislation that is passed. I just want you to soak that in for a minute. What a big deal that is. 40% carbon reduction for the US. So celebrate. Maybe it's not perfect, but damn, is it good. Welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. In this show, we're talking about taxes, money, and careers for creative people who have a big vision for changing the world with their work. I'm your host, Hannah Cole, artist, tax pro, and the founder of Sunlight Tax. If you're an artist, designer, or creative entrepreneur who wants to grow your business sustainably, manage your taxes, and build a stash of fuck you money so you can control your own time and have a bigger impact with your work, you are in the right place. Hello, welcome to the Sunlight Podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about something that is surprisingly unpopular, but I'm hoping will leave you with some hope, which is how patriotic I've been feeling. The Biden administration has gotten done so much. And I want to talk to you today about how impressive and incredible the Inflation Reduction Act is, because I don't think it's gotten much publicity, and there is so much in this monumental piece of legislation that is going to help you, the individual US taxpayer, but also our planet. And so I just want to give this bill some daylight and some air and make sure that you, the listeners of the Sunlight Podcast, know what's going on and know that something really freaking awesome happened that seemed to barely make a ripple in the news. Okay, so let's set the stage. First of all, before I get into why I think the Inflation Reduction Act is such a monumental piece of legislation and why it's so great for you and for our world and for equity in this country, I just want to talk about taxes at a high level, right? I do taxes, right? I teach about taxes. And I think it's really important to keep in perspective what taxes actually are, because we lose sight of it in the day-to-day. Taxes, to me, are our agreement together about what kind of society we want to build, right? They are our mutual agreement. And that's a nonpartisan statement. It doesn't matter who you are or what your politics are. If you are a part of this country, if you are a taxpayer in this country, you are part of paying into that shared agreement, right? Really, really important. And there has been a long-term project, yes, on the right, to try and get most US taxpayers to have a real knee-jerk reaction that is anti-tax, that says all taxes are bad. I should always be upset when I have to pay taxes. I should always want lower taxes. And I disagree with that. I don't think that is a good way of viewing our tax system, because what do you end up with in a world where we don't pay tax at all? We end up with a place where, you need your own personal security to walk around safely in your neighborhood, where you have to send your children to private school and there is no public school option. The dystopia that exists in a country without taxes it's beyond the pale. It's beyond what I ever want to consider living in. And I'm afraid that we are getting closer and closer to it as we have a culture that is more and more anti-tax. So I'm just here to stand up for the grownups and say, taxes are how you have a functional country, right? I actually am pro-functional country, functional democracy. And because I'm a grown-up, I recognize that means we don't get to eat candy all day and expect to be able to run a marathon. If you want to have a great country, you got to pay taxes. And that means you and me, we have to pay taxes. It also means, yes, large multinational corporations that put, for example, Cupertino, California, all over their products should not be allowed to, offshore their profits to Ireland and not pay here in the United States, where they're very happy to take credit for being US based. Part of that is that it's really important that tax laws are fair. It's really critical, right? We all have to believe that the system is generally working. Are we always going to agree on all things? Obviously not. We have one of the most diverse countries on the planet. And for that reason, it's particularly hard to get us to agree, right? That's kind of the messy part. But it's true. It's real. Okay. I do also want to set a really important baseline for you so you understand what it is to work with an accountant, no matter what that accountant's personal politics may be. All accountants, including me, have basically a singular attitude about taxes being paid by their individual clients, which is we will get you a tax return where you pay the minimum possible amount of tax every single time, every single client. There is no accountant out there who's trying to make you pay more taxes. And I say that as a person who believes in the system of paying taxes. I don't try to make any individual person pay more than they should rightfully be paying. In fact, it is always a goal to make an individual client get the maximum advantage, maximum benefit they possibly can out of their taxes. So you can rest easy that even if you were to come to Sunlight Tax to get your taxes done, though we're not taking more new tax clients, we would never take this out on you, right? But I am saying at the macro level, I believe in our country and our citizens and taxpayers, not just citizens, paying taxes. But that doesn't change how I actually prepare taxes. What that does mean, though, the corollary there is that I am relying on the need for our tax laws to be fair, right? The tax code is actually built around a presumption that you are trying to get your tax bill as low as possible, right? I've had people actually sort of push back at me and call me bad names because I'm trying to lower the taxes for every single individual client who I work with. That is the setup of the incentives built into our tax system. That is the economics behind it. That is actually what's right and fair, right? What you need is stop, measures within the tax system, within the tax law that ensure that every single taxpayer is paying some fair minimum amount of tax, right? And I want to just be really clear as I say that 60% of Americans do not pay any income tax at all. I don't know if you knew that, but that is true. So the amount paying income taxes is really something that is based in a progressive system. And because of the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit, many, many, many US taxpayers actually do not pay income tax at all. So that's another thing for you to understand. Okay, a lot of things I know and take for granted as a tax person, I don't take for granted that you know or that the average citizen knows. So the baseline is no accountant is ever going to make you pay $1 more than you actually owe. That is the baseline for me and for anybody else. But the tax laws do, in fact, need to be fair for that system to work well. And I do think that everybody needs to pay what they owe. And I do think there are areas that are not fair. But again, I will tell you what I tell my own children, which is, in your classroom, there may be people who behave terribly, who don't come to class, who start fights in the hallway. That doesn't mean you're allowed to be a shitty person, right? Like the fact that other people do things at times that are not great isn't license for us to not act within as the best version of ourselves, right? So there is a little unfairness that does exist at times. And to me, that's no excuse for saying, screw the whole system. We should all cheat on our taxes. No, no, no. All right. I believe in good citizenship. And I don't think anybody being a bad citizen is licensed for any one of us to scrap our idea of good citizenship. I hope that you agree with that. Okay. Part 2, though, of our taxes being our agreement as a society. Part 2 that I think a lot of people don't really connect to taxes is that for it all to work, we all need to be active in our democracy. Yeah, that's real. And it's also important for us to be represented well, right? So I am not here to say that all the tax laws are equitable across race and gender, citizenship. And part of the reason that that is true is because historically in this country, not all groups have been represented to the same degree. I mean, it's no surprise to anyone listening that white men, well-heeled white men, have been overrepresented in the people making the laws of our country. So does the tax code advantage that group of individuals? Absolutely, it does. There is no question. There is patriarchy built into our tax code, specifically in the fact that married filing joint tax return really prioritizes a couple with a high income earner and a low or no income earner. That is a patriarchal setup, right? I say this without judgment, even though I have personal feelings. That just is how the system is built. And there is a bit of a penalty built in for two equal earning couples, right? And this can be a penalty for a gay couple who pays taxes together and are equal earners, but it actually has really big racial justice history. So traditionally, Black families, just for example, families of other colors too, but I'll use Black families as an example here, typically have been equal earning, right? A married filing joint household that has two Black spouses, they have not traditionally had the privilege of having a stay-at-home parent who doesn't earn an income, right? Black women have always had to work, right? Traditionally, right? I'm not saying every single case across the United States, but like in the aggregate, in the statistics, that is true. Because of discrimination, it has been necessary for both parties to earn income. And so the tax code, you can attribute it to malice, but I actually don't even. I think just the fact that, in the 20s, when we're making laws like this, there were not a lot of Black women in Congress, right? So those voices simply never got into influencing how we created the tax code. So there is a penalty for that Black couple who both earn income. So that's what I mean. That is both patriarchy and racism built in at one time. Now, does that mean I say nobody should pay their taxes? We should all cheat on our taxes. Screw it all. No, because I actually really believe in fixing our democracy. So I'm going to say a really unpopular thing, which is that I am a patriot. I am really, really patriotic. I really love this country. And part of it is actually because I read the tax laws. And the Inflation Reduction Act, which I'm about to teach you about, it's a part of why I love this country. This is a piece of beautifully crafted legislation that does the right things and pays for it by doing even more of the right things. It's like a two tastes that taste great together kind of a tax bill. And I absolutely love it. I hope you feel as proud of it as I do by the end of today's episode. Okay, so there's fucked up shit in our tax code. That is real. I'm not here to sugarcoat that. In fact, I'd like to teach you about it and be very, very real about it. But I don't think the answer is screw it all, or I think the answer is we need more representation. We need more Black women in Congress. We need more Native Americans in Congress. We need more queer folks and folks with disabilities, like lots and lots of different people with lots of different perspectives on life and experiences have to actually be part of our democracy, including running for office on purpose so that our laws are more fair to a larger group of people, right? That's part of making fair tax law, right? So running for office is actually, that's a big deal. And just being an active participant in our democracy is a really, really big deal. Now, not all of us are going to run for office. Only a teeny weeny percentage of us will. Although, if you feel like it, please do. And I will welcome you to be on the Sunlight podcast to talk about it. But all of us can help our democracy and be good, active citizens. And so this, as the first episode of the brand new year, I want to really have a subtext of this podcast episode, which is to say, like, let's answer that question that John F. Kennedy posed to this country. I don't know how many years ago, 60 years ago. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. And I say this as somebody who has learned a lot of lessons in marriage over the years. if you look around at people who have great marriages, they do not say, what can my spouse do for me every day, right? That question comes second. The question that comes first in a really fantastic marriage is, what can I do for my spouse? And I'm here to say that democracy is the same thing. You might not want to be married to this country, but you know what? If you live here, if you're a taxpayer here, you are pretty heavily invested in it. So I will say the same thing here. What can you do for your country is a really good question. And you can put your own flavor, whatever that is. And that's the beauty. Okay. So that was a little soapboxy. Let me jump down to the brass tacks and talk about kind of how I try to show up for my democracy. I'll say ways that I have tried and continue to work on this. Of course, when people are running for office, identifying candidates whose missions you really believe in and really helping them win, that's a huge component of being good to your democracy, right? So I'm going to discount social media altogether because I think a lot of people think that that's democratic action, and it's just barely. I mean, it's like barely doing anything. So I don't even credit that. What campaigns really want, I mean, sure, share their posts, publicize their meetings, great. But I'm not even counting it as action because it's so minimal. What people really need, what campaigns really need when you talk to them is they need bodies to knock on doors and make phone calls. Those are the big ones. So those are things I like to do. In this last election cycle, the midterms just happened. I worked really, really hard to elect Maggie Ullman to city council here in Asheville. I identified her as, to me, Maggie Ullman, she ran for city council and won, and I hosted her on episode 11 of the podcast, so you can go check that out. But to me, Maggie had such a big vision, such an impressive and long-term and ambitious vision for climate change work, for bringing communities together, and for real economic sustainability, including changing models that, not even working only within the system as it exists now, but actually shifting our system away from federal and state budgets to incorporating climate change action into city budgets. That's a really big deal. And that kind of visionary action, that just doesn't come around every day. So I was really impressed by Maggie. The other thing, besides just having a big vision, she also is the candidate, in my opinion, that had the absolute best, like, boots on the ground experience and real chops in pulling together diverse groups of constituents to get them all moving in the same direction. So building agreement, building consensus, not alienating people, knowing when to act, knowing when to shut up. These are really important qualities in a candidate. And so I really believed in Maggie, still believe in Maggie very much. So I donated money to Maggie. I wrote multiple letters to the editor. I knocked on doors multiple times for her. To me, that is showing my support for Maggie for city council. And so that was the action I took there locally. Oh, I hosted her on the podcast here to show some of you what her vision was, because I think it's pretty amazing. So those are great things. Getting involved in local politics is super important. A lot of us read, the New York Times or listen to podcasts and we get our news in a way that is incredibly biased towards national news. The thing about paying attention to national news, sure, read the headlines, great, but you can't do as much about that as you can do about local politics. And when you get involved in local politics, the thing that's so cool is you could be a hero for running some photocopies for a city council candidate, right? It doesn't take that much to make a big contribution. And so your degree of impact when you're involved in local politics is just so much bigger, and you can make real demonstrable change. So I encourage a lot of you to get out of that New York Times, NPR bubble and get local, right? Sometimes that means subscribing to your little, limping along local newspaper, if you still have one. And if you don't, you may have to do other stuff. Showing up for city council meetings, some of this stuff is a little boring, frankly, but really, really important. So going to candidate forum meetings, just becoming an informed citizen by doing that. That stuff is really important. And it's important too, because when you're involved locally, you start to see where taxes get spent and what the conversation is around how taxes operate in your area, what people's attitudes are about it. Sometimes people are fussing about like not adding a bike lane because of some teeny little marginal cost. And you realize that everyone you know really is dying to have a bike lane and not be in their car, get some exercise. It's like win, win, win. And that the budget is not that big. And maybe you could help get a bond issue passed, or, that maybe that there is some support you could build up locally over issues that people are stressing about, and you see a way forward, right? So there's just a lot of ways you can contribute when you get involved locally. Hey, do you want this year to go better with your money? I'm here to help you. January is prime time to set up for a good year when it comes to your taxes and your money. And I'm going to be teaching a free class on January 12th to help you do just that. The fact is, there is no tax education in this country. So you might be feeling bad about how confused you've been about your taxes, but I'm here to tell you it's not you. I'm also here to tell you it's not as hard as you've been thinking it is, especially when you have a guide who really gets your world. I'm Hannah Cole. I am a professional artist, and I run a tax company, Sunlight Tax, that does the taxes and teaches tax education to creative, self-employed people who are driven by a mission just like you. In my free class, you will shift your mindset. You will get excited about the impact that you can have in the world when you set up your taxes on autopilot and build fuck you money. Learn the 3 mistakes that every self-employed person is making with their taxes, and the framework that I use inside my program, Money Bootcamp, that will help you understand your taxes, set up your systems so they run on autopilot, and build freedom and security for yourself. In other words, fuck you money. Join me live on Thursday, January 12th at noon East Coast time. You'll get the recording if you can't make it live, so register anyway. Again, the live class is on Thursday, January 12th, and the link to register is go.sunlighttax.com/free. That's go.sunlighttax.com/free. I'll see you in class. Those are some things I have done and I like to do. I also do support national candidates. Jasmine B. Ferrara was running for Congress in the district where I'm represented. It is a very gerrymandered district, and it was a very, very hard uphill battle the whole time. And she was on episode 11 too, and she continues to inspire me. She did not win that race, although damn, was it a good campaign. It's one of the most diverse campaigns I've ever seen. There were more young people, more people of color, lots and lots of queer people volunteering for Jasmine's campaign. I just felt like that was a campaign that really spoke to people. But we are in a very gerrymandered district, and it is hard for anyone on the left to win that seat no matter what. So we don't win them all, right? But we certainly try. What are some other things that I suggest or that I do personally when it comes to local politics and where taxes count? It's like who's implementing them and what vision they're implementing. Well, the other thing I do is I try to strengthen and support the infrastructure of my local Democratic Party. It's no surprise to you that I'm a Democrat, right? I am. I'm just going to be upfront about that. Though I will say that in my lectures, I try to remain absolutely nonpartisan because taxes are for everyone, right? Doesn't matter what party you're from. You need to understand taxes, and tax laws need to be fair to all people. Here in the state of North Carolina, where I live, we organize parties by county primarily. So where I try to be the most active is at the county level. So I attend, when I can, Buncombe County Democratic meetings. And it's a great place to just get a pulse on what's going on, see what initiatives are brewing, see when the big, there's like a certain time of year where people make proposals about initiatives we want to pass. Resolution. So that's a place where you can actually affect the law. It's really interesting once you start getting involved and seeing like what it takes to like get things on the ballot in your area. So I highly recommend you find your party, find the place where they organize locally and get involved. Go to some meetings, see what's going on. They can literally always use your help. And once you go to a couple meetings, you will find like, oh, they could use some help making photocopies. Oh, they could use some help getting more people to show up at the next meeting. Your skill set may be in any one of many different areas, and there's a place you can use it with your local party. I will also say in North Carolina, now I hope many of you listening are not in the state of North Carolina or anywhere near Asheville, but a lot of this stuff does translate to whatever state you are in. So I hope you take this and kind of use it to look into your own local system. The other thing here is that, the Supreme Court has made it very clear that a lot of legislation that used to be decided federally is going to get kicked back down to the states. So this is a time, no matter what side you're on, where state politics are going to be more important than ever. They've always been important. Way more of the laws that actually touch and affect your life are decided at the state level than at the federal level, which is why paying attention to state politics and local politics is so important, but even more so now. So if you happen to be in North Carolina, some really great organizations doing really great work for democracy in North Carolina are Democracy NC and the League of Women Voters, which is nonpartisan. And I also personally agree with the politics and love the work of the Reverend Dr. John Barber. He runs the Poor People's Campaign. It is really the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. made flesh. Dr. Barber was the president of the NAACP. And I will tell you, he inspired me to join the NAACP. So I'm actually a card-carrying member of the NAACP as a result of getting involved with the Poor People's Campaign and his work. And I have been to his Moral Monday marches in Raleigh when the State House here in North Carolina has done some really shitty things. He's doing some really incredible organizing on the minimum wage, on equity issues. If you've really read up on Martin Luther King and the sort of campaign, the Poor People's Campaign that he was running towards the end of his life, it's just really clear from a legacy in this country that, racism from the get-go was basically invented in order to keep poor people from uniting with each other. And so if you believe in economic equity, kicking racism out is really important, and working across racial lines is very, very, very important. When we have these cultural distinctions that keep people with shared interests, like their economics, from joining together, it's just a really successful way of people who have all the chips, all the resources, all the money to prevent the rest of us from effective action. So I'm really strong on the other side of that. So the Poor People's Campaign is an awesome movement. The Reverend Dr. John Barber, highly recommend you check him out. And hell, maybe you'll join the NAACP too. White people can join as well. So let's talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. This is a bill that it was a bill passed along party lines. It was 100% Democrats who voted for it, no Republican support whatsoever. And very interestingly, I want to tell you a little thing that I have learned from being a tax person. This bill was passed as what is called a reconciliation bill. A reconciliation bill is a bill that goes through, it's meant to be for budget issues. And a reconciliation bill by law has to be budget neutral, right? So if you spend money in a reconciliation bill, you have to make up for that money in other ways to create budget neutrality. In other words, that it's not an outflow or inflow of money, it's neutral, it stays at zero. So you can raise funds over here in order to spend money and pay for things over here. Why is this way? Reconciliation bills, I don't really know why, but they do bypass the filibuster rules. When you pass a reconciliation bill, you do not need 60 Senate candidates to get it through. You only need a majority. And this is how, when we have a Democratic majority in the House and Senate, we can pass major legislation, but we need to make sure that it is budget neutral. So pretty much all the bills that are getting passed these days are reconciliation bills, because bipartisan politics does not seem to be working super well. Although I don't want you to be overly cynical on that. There is a little bit of bright light there too, for another podcast. Okay, so this was a reconciliation bill. The thing that's interesting about it, it is the largest expenditure related to climate change and energy security that has ever been passed in the United States. Think about that. What a big deal. It contains $369 billion in expenditures related to climate change, and it makes up for them through other means. The IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, I'm going to keep referring to it as the IRA. It is the biggest climate investment by the federal government in United States history. I just want you to let that sink in for a minute, right? It's easy to get on board complaining that nothing gets done. This got done. This got done. This is real. And look at the results. So the United States is currently responsible for 11% of global carbon emissions. And what this bill is going to do, it is projected to reduce carbon emissions 40% by the year 2030. Now, as I'm speaking today, it is just about 2023. That's in only 7 years. 40% carbon reduction emissions in 7 years. We did that. This is a done deal. This is legislation that is passed. I just want you to soak that in for a minute. What a big deal that is. 40% carbon reduction for the US. So celebrate. Maybe it's not perfect, but damn, is it good. So let's talk about what else is in the bill, what it does. So the IRA contains climate provisions that subsidize energy resources that do not emit carbon. These are things like solar, wind, and nuclear power. And it's really important that we have these subsidies in this bill because without subsidies, polluting fossil fuels are often cheaper than solar, wind, and nuclear power. In other words, one of the major goals of this bill was to make it economically viable to have clean energy sources. And I'm here to tell you, having now studied economics, if you don't create an economic incentive, if you make it better for somebody's bottom line to do the right thing, they will do the right thing. And so this bill actually changes the balance into that direction. That's important. There are also some Biden administration geopolitical and economic objectives that get met inside of this bill. So interestingly, this bill also lessens reliance on manufacturing in China. If you've been paying attention in the news even slightly, you know that we're getting a little nervous about China. The other thing I want to make sure that you understand is in this bill is that as we move to cleaner energy sources, there is a real and very legitimate fear among areas and states where the economy is based around old traditional carbon emitting sources of energy. For example, coal, fracking, shale. So I want you to know that one of the major things inside this bill is massive incentives built in to put clean energy sources into areas most affected by the energy transition, right? So if you establish a wind farm in a traditional coal mining area, there's extra subsidies in this bill to incentivize that. In other words, there's a structure built into this bill, and I think this is a beautifully crafted piece of legislation. There's a structure built into this bill to actually help replace the jobs that will be lost as we transition from, coal and dirty energy to clean energy. It's awesome. Now, for individual consumers, the IRA subsidies reduce the price of electric vehicles, solar panels, heat pumps, and other energy efficient home improvements. Pretty cool. There's lots of money available for that. And after phase in, some of the tax credits that you will get for buying a clean vehicle, new or used, for establishing, solar energy at your house, charging station for your electric vehicle, things like that. Something really, really interesting and cool is that not all of those credits are going to have to be taken on a tax return. That might not seem like a big deal to you, but I'm going to tell you why that is an equity issue and why it is a big deal. 60% of US households pay no income tax. In other words, their income is too low to meet the threshold of paying income taxes in this country. Most of those households, or many of those households, I believe the number is 30 million, but don't quote me on it, do not file a tax return at all. which means when we give tax credits that can only be obtained through filing a tax return, a lot of the lowest income Americans, the lowest income taxpayers, miss out on those tax credits. And that is a real serious equity issue. This was an equity issue that came up in the child tax credit that was not renewed by Congress, sad to say, but that during the COVID years, the Bidens expanded child tax credit. Oh my God, this little sidebar here, it reduced US child poverty by 50%, by half. Oh my God, the Biden administration has gotten so much stuff done. But a lot of the equity issues there were that you have to actually file a tax return to claim that credit. So many people who would have benefited from it, who didn't have the information about it, didn't go and file a tax return in order to claim the credit. They could have, and they could still go file amended returns to claim it retroactively. And I hope you do if you're listening, but it does mean that that credit did not touch all the people that really would have benefited the most from it. So when we craft a piece of legislation to say that these tax credits can actually come to you through different formats, for example, to be given to you at the point of sale when you buy new energy efficient front door or windows for your house, or when you go to a car dealership to buy a clean vehicle. The fact that we are creating a provision in this tax law to give you the tax credit at that moment when you plunk down your credit card, that is a big, big, big deal. It's an equity win. So I want you to know about that because you have to be a bit of a tax nerd to have seen that in this legislation. Yeah, guilty. Okay. So that's really important. So for the clean vehicle credits, they're establishing one of the rules is you're going to have to buy your car through a dealership, even if it's used. But the reason behind that is the IRS is going to be certifying dealerships to be able to transfer this tax credit, that is the taxpayer's tax credit, to the dealer so that the dealer can give a point of sale discount on your clean vehicle. Because do you want the discount when you have to come up with the cash for that car? Or do you want to wait a year until you file a tax return and you get a big credit on your tax return? I'll tell you what I want, and it's what probably you want too. So let's talk about the major topics that got addressed in the Inflation Reduction Act. Interestingly, so I mentioned that this is a reconciliation bill. So not only did we spend $369 billion in this bill, we actually gain $369 billion back in income to the US Treasury at the same time, because that is what a reconciliation bill is. It is budget neutral. So don't let anybody say, oh, the Democrats spent on this bill. No, they didn't spend. This is a budget neutral bill. It came to zero. So yes, $369 billion went out. $369 will also come back in. So that's important. But what's interesting is the way we are going to bring in with this bill that $369 billion. These are some of the ways. By imposing an excise tax on corporate stock repurchases. I don't really know all the details, and I'm not going to get into this one. But corporate stock buybacks are basically what a lot of big corporations have done with extra boosts in money, with tax breaks and things like that. And the fact is, corporate stock buybacks do not help the greater US economy. Yes, they help the shareholders in that corporation, but they do not help the US GDP overall. They do not help a broader portion of Americans. So this is a really good thing. I'm very pro imposing this excise tax. The IRA also established an excise tax on drug manufacturers, producers, and importers who fail to enter into drug pricing agreements. So there's been a lot of talk about the US government being allowed to negotiate drug prices. I don't know why this is such an incredible heavy lift. I assume it's related to corporate lobbying, but we are now allowed to negotiate on only 10 drugs in the US. It's kind of incredible to me how tiny that number is, but even that is a huge, huge deal and will put a lot of money back into the US Treasury. And we are expanding the amount of drugs to 20 different drugs by the year 2029. Again, 20 drugs. I mean, You've probably taken 20 different drugs in the last 3 years. So I don't think that's that many, but this seems like a really good thing. And I don't know, can we get more pressure on this? That would be my wish. The IRA also extends the health insurance premium tax credit modifications that were made in the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 through 2025. So what does that mean? Basically, through 2021, the American Rescue Plan Act actually was a sort of one of those COVID era tax laws that got passed. It actually limited the amount that a household has to pay in medical insurance premiums, so long as that household's income was 6 times the federal poverty limit. You would not have to pay more than 8.5% of your income to health insurance premiums. This affected 7 million additional people who are kind of left out of the premium tax credits of the Obama era. It included a new 7 million taxpayers. So that's a really big deal to be making healthcare less expensive and more affordable to 7 million more families. So that has been extended in the IRA through 2025. It was set to expire at the end of 2022. And then there's also modifications to the tax treatment of the energy sector, including extension and modification of the credit for electricity produced from certain renewable resources, extension and modification of the energy credit, and extension of excise tax credits for alternative fuels, biodiesel, and renewable diesel. There are also provisions in this bill which allow transfers of certain credits to another taxpayer and a direct pay option for certain credits. So, for example, in this bill, nonprofits are going to be allowed to transfer tax credits that they cannot accept, that they cannot take or benefit from. They're going to get to transfer their would-be tax credits for doing the things in this bill to the engineer or architect who designs their energy efficient buildings. So there's some really cool stuff in here. Another way that we are making up for the budget is by designating $80 billion to the IRS. It's expected to increase tax collection by $206 billion for a net increase of $124 billion. That's kind of a no-brainer to me, but it is so popular to just get mad at the IRS and cut its budget. The IRS's budget has been cut 23% in the last 10 years, the last 12 years since 2010. And let me tell you, as a tax practitioner, I really feel it. It has become painful to call them. They often will hang up on you. There's not enough staff to answer the phone. That's a result of budget cuts. And it's really important we fund the IRS properly so that you can get service, so that someone will pick up the phone and help you when you need it. And it's our tax collection arm. And I want you to know that Biden has made assurances that this will not increase audits on households with income under $400,000. So despite what the Republicans are saying about this, they are not coming for you. This $80 billion is going to help the IRS go after tax cheats in the upper income levels. When we cut the budget at the IRS, do you know who gets audited more frequently? The easy people. Who are the easy people? The poor and the middle class. Because when you're poor and middle class, your taxes are much more straightforward and simple. It's when you have fancy accountants and lawyers, when you have private letter rulings, when you have, itemized deductions, capital gains, and you're making dubious tax positions, which you have to take someone to court in order to fight them. That's the expensive audit to enact. And so when we cut the IRS's budget, what we do is we stop rich people from getting audited, and we just put more focus on the poor. So I am here to say I am deeply in favor of funding the IRS more. I think 80 billion is a good start, and I wish they would get triple that. It would make all of our lives better, and it would actually catch tax cheats at the upper end of the income spectrum, where the cheating is losing a lot more money to the US economy. Okay. All right. So those are the basic provisions of the IRA. This is a bit longer than I intended to do. I hope I didn't get too tax nerdy in a way that was boring. Let me know if this was a helpful episode to you. I really wanted to give you, especially at the beginning of the year, a really high-level perspective on taxes. To me, this is sort of a philosophical underpinning of why I run the business that I run, why I like to do tax education. I actually have to read tax bills to maintain my license, and I kind of love it. because it's a superpower. And I love being able to bring that information in a really clear and understandable way to you. So I hope I've done that today. Please let me know what you think. I really want you to appreciate that we got some really good legislation last year. And I hope you thank a Democrat if you like it. It was 100% party line, so it was definitely from the Democrats. But I really hope that you appreciate that all is not lost, all is not broken, and good work is still being done in this country. So the Inflation Reduction Act, it is something I feel grateful for. I feel really proud of as a citizen. So I want you to get some of that feeling and feel good about our democracy. Now, part of why I wanted to get really high level right now is because we're about to enter into tax season. The first thing coming down the pike is 1099s. That is a January thing to get together, as well as some basic organization stuff that you need when you're getting your documents together for taxes. So I will be here for you on those issues for the rest of January. I also want to let you know that I will be offering a class on 1099s. If you have to actually issue 1099s, if you paid contractors in 2022, I will be doing a live class on January 24th. So stay tuned. I'll have sign up information in a future podcast about that. But as we get into the nitty-gritty stuff, I just wanted to take a pause at the beginning of the year to express some gratitude for something that has happened this past tax year and get you excited about, the good side of taxes. And after that, we're going to get really detailed and really personal about how I can help you make your taxes simpler and easy moving into 2023. By the way, if you want the details on the new energy tax credits inside the Inflation Reduction Act, I did a live class on that in December. I did not bother packaging it so I could sell it after the fact because it was not as well attended as I expected it to be. But if you are interested in getting that class, I will turn it into something that you can purchase for a pretty low, reasonable price. So just DM me if you are interested in that new energy tax credits class, and I will figure out a way to get it to you. All right. Now, how do I want to leave this episode? I hope that this has given you a sense of perspective and a sense of, appreciation for the democracy that you live in and you are a part of. And I'm going to ask you a question starting out in the new year, which is, to try to be a good partner to our country. Good stuff does happen in our country. It's not all bad stuff. And I really believe in fixing it, in seeing what's wrong with clear-headedness and actually getting in there and doing the work to fix it. So I would ask you, as you're making your New Year's resolutions, will you think about and put onto that resolution list, what can I do for my democracy this year? Can I go to some meetings? Can I help some candidates? Can I maybe even run for office? Your local politics really, really needs you. And there's plenty of room for all kinds of different people. And the more underrepresented a group you are from, the more our democracy needs you in particular. So I really want to encourage you to not think of democracy as a spectator sport, but to jump in the arena. And I will be here with you every step of the way. And I will certainly be here to help you figure out the tax part. So if you appreciated this perspective, I don't know where else you can get a podcast episode quite like this one. So if you appreciate this kind of high level breakdown of a tax bill, will you share it with a friend? Will you leave a review? Will you let me know? Your feedback helps me direct future episodes. And so if I get a lot of feedback that this was helpful, that you liked it, I will do more. And trust me, there's lots of new tax legislation coming. So I'm here for it. All right. Thank you so much for listening. Again, if you liked or appreciated this episode, send me a message on Instagram @SunlightTax. Share it with a friend. That makes such a huge difference. Or leave a review about this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. I will talk to you soon with more information about your 1099s and tax setup for the year coming up. See ya. Bye-bye. Hey, do you want this year to go better with your money? I'm here to help you. January is prime time to set up for a good year when it comes to your taxes and your money. And I'm going to be teaching a free class on January 12th to help you do just that. The fact is, there is no tax education in this country. So you might be feeling bad about how confused you've been about your taxes, but I'm here to tell you it's not you. I'm also here to tell you it's not as hard as you've been thinking it is, especially when you have a guide who really gets your world. I'm Hannah Cole. I am a professional artist, and I run a tax company, Sunlight Tax, that does the taxes and teaches tax education to creative, self-employed people who are driven by a mission just like you. In my free class, you will shift your mindset. You will get excited about the impact that you can have in the world when you set up your taxes on autopilot and build fuck you money. Learn the 3 mistakes that every self-employed person is making with their taxes, and the framework that I use inside my program, Money Bootcamp, that will help you understand your taxes, set up your systems so they run on autopilot, and build freedom and security for yourself. In other words, fuck you money. Join me live on Thursday, January 12th at noon East Coast time. You'll get the recording if you can't make it live, so register anyway. Again, the live class is on Thursday, January 12th, and the link to register is go.sunlighttax.com/free. That's go.sunlighttax.com/free. I'll see you in class. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review. It really helps, and share it with a friend. I'm so grateful. This podcast is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links we reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.